Hey guys, it's Dan. Welcome back. This is going to be a how-to video on painting large shields or pavaises that will involve some Perry Miniatures mercenaries that I'd built as crossbowmen. I've actually had these models kicking around for quite a while. I have, I think, 30 crossbowmen and 30 handgunners from, well, several of those kits. And I don't play with ranged weapons very often in the games that I utilize these models for, so I've never really had a reason to paint these up, but these miniatures have been in a kind of half-painted state for long enough, and I thought, well, it's time to get them done, and would be good fodder for a how-to video here. So what we're working toward, what you see in the background here, is I'm painting them as Burgundians, and I had not been able to make up my mind about what I wanted to do with them. I wanted them to be mercenary crossbowmen, so all of their outfits are kind of in beiges and browns. But the shields, I tried painting like 3 different ways, and then finally just said, screw it, they're going to be Burgundians. And so what that last step that you just saw was me base coating in Corax white to try to cover up some of the prior paint jobs that I've done. And if you were smart, unlike me, you would have just base coated or undercoated in white, and you could have skipped that step entirely. Move straight on to painting in blue. I'm painting in Techless blue back there in the background. Even with base coating in white or undercoating in white, you're still going to have to paint a layer of white for reasons that I'll explain in a little bit. It's because the color of the undercoat is not going to be exactly the same as acrylic paints, so you still have to get a layer in there. But if you start out with white, you don't have to do this Corax white layer in order to get the same foundation color. So anyway, so because I was indecisive, now I have to do some extra work, and that's several layers of Corax white. Techless blue, again, is what I'm painting in the background here. Despite being a layer paint, I found that this paint has decent coverage, and I like it is a kind of an old enchanted blue, going back to old Citadel colors. Yeah, you can see here I'm painting it straight over Mephiston red is what that is, the color that I had previously thought I wanted to go with. One other note, maybe some of you are already screaming at your computer screens. I have my blue and my white on the wrong side. That I didn't even think to Google what a Burgundian shield, or what the surviving example, I believe, looked like, and the blue was on the right-hand side, the white was on the left-hand side. So just something to be aware of if you're trying to copy this tutorial kind of shot for shot. I'm going in with white scar now. Again, I had done Corax white initially, and the thing to keep in mind as you're doing any kind of freehand work is to not get it right on the first pass. You're going to have to just accept the fact that there's going to be some back and forth that's going to be required here. Not only because it's just so difficult to get the lines right on the first go, but I've found that cutting back in with that original color somehow adds to the illusion for me. It makes it look less like whatever freehand decal or design you put on top of the shield is just placed on top of the shield, but rather it's an integrated part of the shield. But maybe that's, I don't know, maybe just my mind playing tricks on me. But again, I'm going back in, painting over the white areas, and I'm going to have to go back. You can see some of the old color still coming through, and it's likely that, again, had you started out with just a white surface here, that you wouldn't have to do as much of this back and forth that I'm doing, just trying to get a solid color to work on. So just keep that in mind. What we're then going to do, once I'm done with this step here, is start on the red cross, the X that's on the back of these shields, and then cutting back in with the blue and with the white. That's kind of what we're working toward, much like with the checkered shield video that I put out, how there was some seesawing involved. That's exactly what we're going to be doing here, but instead it's with white, blue, and red. So the color I'm using here, this is actually from a company called AK Acrylics. I have a couple of paints from them that I've picked up, and I don't see a lot of places that carry these, but I really like the variety of colors and the pigment that's in them. I think it's good. Oh, I'm actually sorry, I'm doing a layer of white here. Maybe actually the previous shot that you had was me doing another layer of Corax white. So this is actually not white scar. I have been trying to make a conscious effort to sub out some of my, call them non-proprietary Citadel paints for like if it's a generic color like a white or a red. I've been trying to pick up other manufacturers as well. And so yeah, this is actually Vallejo Flat White, I think it's called, and I think it's excellent. This is Vallejo Game Color, and yeah, I think it's fantastic. And I'm going to be looking to add some more Vallejo paints into my collection. Again, it's nothing personal against Games Workshop so much as it is just trying to utilize some other products that are on the market. You can see one other thing that I'm doing that I mentioned in the checkered shield video as well is I'm rotating the model in my hand when I'm doing different sides. Part of this is because I'm left-handed, for those that were not aware. So when I'm painting on the right-hand side of the shield rather than painting across the blue area, it's easier to flip the shield over, especially when I'm doing detail work like cutting in a straight line. It's a lot easier to just flip the model over in my hand. It also has the tangential benefit of stabilizing the model against your hand. You can't see from my hand placement, my arms are braced against the desk pretty much at all times. And so if you have then the model braced against your hand, it keeps them pretty steady. So what we're doing here, this is that AK acrylic red color that I had mentioned just a moment ago. And so the trick here is trying to keep, in this case we're painting a cross, we're painting an X in the back of the shield. So trying to keep it as centered as possible because you want that intersection of those two lines to hit where the white and the blue meet up in the middle of the shield there. So to achieve that, what I do is I start with a small dot in the very center of the shield, or as close to the center as I think I can get. And then what I do is I paint a line to each corner, starting with one complete diagonal across the shield. And then I do the other side. And what I do, because no matter what you do, it's never going to meet up on the sides of the shield exactly where you want it to every single time. So the best thing to do is paint that dot in the center as your starting point, kind of a focal point. Paint then two lines from that dot out as a complete diagonal, and then kind of see where the points touch the edges of the shield, and then you can see me place two dots there, both in the blue and the white areas, kind of approximating where they're hitting on the other side of the shield. And I've found by doing it that way, kind of one step at a time, you're able to create some reasonably accurate X's. Again, I keep saying it, I'm going to keep repeating it. This is not the final step. You have to go into this with the mentality that you're not trying to get it perfect on this first go. You're going to have to go back in and cut in the white and the blue to clean up those red lines. And in fact, I think with this particular paint job that I'm doing, I go back in with the red another time as well. So it really will help if you go into it accepting that and understanding that, kind of enjoy the process. The journey is the destination, and it'll be better as a result if you just trust me on this. I don't know if this is superior or not. I haven't made up my mind from looking back at this footage as I was editing it, but that I used my setup that I've been doing for unboxing videos with kind of the overhead camera, because not only because it was already set up, but principally because I've found it's really difficult to paint around a camera. The setup that's kind of in front of me at a lower angle is trickier because I'm essentially looking into the camera while I'm painting with my arms wrapped around the camera. So until I find a superior solution, this might be what I do for any of these painting tutorial videos. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments if you don't mind, whatever you prefer, because I can try to come up with a different system if this is just not sufficient for you guys. And I read all the comments, I respond to as many as I feel warranted. So if you could drop me a line down there. So yeah, I'm going through here now again and doing another coat with the red. Just either broadening the line or trying to tighten it up wherever I can. Again, the mentality here is I'm going to come back in with the white and with the blue in order to clean these lines up. The final step that we'll get to once I'm done with this kind of back and forth game that we're playing here is I'll start some weathering work on the shield. And because these are larger shields, the weathering that I do is a little bit more involved than it would be on, say, a smaller shield. And I'll go through that at the end as we have those shots coming in, but I just wanted you to know kind of the direction that we're headed in here. So you can see I'm getting some more of the white ready here to, again, go in and do another layer of white. And I don't know if I do it at this step or maybe it's the next step. And we'll find out together here in just a second. But what I'm going to do, because I find that when you're painting on, especially like medieval or Dark Age models, I find that really straight lines look somewhat too modern for me, and maybe that's just my kind of gritty painting style. I'm always looking for things to look kind of beat up. But it's sort of as a pre-weathering step, what I do as I'm coming in and reapplying some of this color and kind of cutting it against this red to neaten the lines, I'm actually deliberately breaking the lines up a bit, almost to make it look, if think of it this way, like what you're trying to portray here is the idea that some of the red paint has chipped off. And the way to do that is by not like creating squiggles or anything like that, but you can see, and I think this is what I'm doing here. It's very small. Again, I apologize that it's not zoomed in or anything. But what you're doing, I kind of keep the brush in one direction and then cut in against that red and create some lines and some dots. Again, think about it like chipping, like I'm chipping away at the red with the white color. I'm going to do the same thing with the blue on the other side. And yeah, what that does is it creates kind of an irregular shape, and it creates the illusion that some of this red paint over time, through combats, has been chipped away at. And then we'll build upon that with some of the weathering steps that we're going to do at the very end of this video. So you can see I don't go crazy with it. I'm not painting over all of the red, just doing little like dots and chips at the red paint with the blue and the white color. And simultaneously, I say neatening the lines, not keeping the edges of the red straight. You're doing exactly the opposite. Rather, you're just trying to make it to where the proportion of red and white and blue looks correct for whatever it is you're trying to do. You can do this exact same thing if you're painting like a Templar cross or, I don't know, an anchor, whatever it is that you're trying to paint on a shield. I would always recommend this kind of a step where you come back in with the color and cut in against it. I mentioned that what we're working toward is a weathering step at the end that we'll get to in just a second, actually. This is sort of what I'm calling the pre-weathering step. But you can already see that they're becoming more and more convincing in the background there with each pass as we go back and forth here. And as a result, some of you might find that the weathering that I'm about to do is too much, that you actually would prefer it as you see it right here. And that's perfectly fine. You don't have to weather your shields. That's not a prerequisite here. But that is only to say that all of this is being done on my miniatures prior to a wash that I do. So I base coat my miniatures. I then dry brush a lighter color to go in with a dot, highlight a white, and then I dip them, or my approximation of dipping. And so it's just something to consider if you're trying to do this for yourself, is that all of this painting that I'm doing for me is predicated on the models then being washed. And so if that's not something that you do, just consider kind of where this would go in as part of your process. So what we're switching to here, this is, it's either Dryad bark or it's Rhinox hide from Citadel. Just a dark brown color. And you can see what I'm doing with a deep detail brush is I'm going in and very faintly, they're not thick lines or anything like that, I'm just creating some dots and some scratches. And, to make it look like these shields have been banged up, hit with swords, or, hit with arrows, as was probably more likely. And just scuffing them up a little bit. And what I would actually do with a smaller shield is something similar. And I think I do come in with a stipple brush. I wouldn't create any of these lines and gouges just because those shields wouldn't be large enough. What I do is you could do it with a sponge. I've seen the same effect done with a sponge, and I think it looks great. I just take an old dry brush and then put some of this paint on, dry brush most of it off like you would normally, and then stipple parts of the shield to make it look like they've been scuffed. And yeah, that's what I'm doing right there. So it's the exact same thing, same color, but instead of with a detail brush, I'm not painting lines and dots. I'm just and it's not on all of them either. And that's another key. I talked about this in my paper banner video, that when weathering, kind of restraint is key, that you don't want to over weather the shields because it's just going to cover up your paint job. And so what I'm now doing after putting the dark brown color on these shields is I'm coming back in with my original wood grain color that is on the other side of these shields. So sort of the implication is that this is the underlying wood of the shield, showing through. And it's counterintuitive, but it's a low light that you're doing. And you might have seen this on like weathering Space Marine tutorials that are out there. It's the exact same concept, which is that you're actually highlighting the lower side of these chips and gouges that you've put in on this shield. And what that does, it makes it look like light is catching these scrapes that are on the shield. So that's the illusion that we're creating here. And again, not all of the scratches get it. It's only the ones that look like they would be really deep gouges on the shields that are going to get this treatment. So that's all I'm doing, is I'm going through and seeing if any of these shields have any of that dark brown color that seems like it would warrant some kind of low light. And then as a final touch, what I'm doing here is this is just straight out of the pot, Citadel Nuln oil. It creates a similar effect to the dark brown color, but it's a fainter color, and it behaves a little bit differently because it's a wash. But I take a detail brush and I apply it in streaks as though they were, again, like hits from a weapon of some kind against the shield. Again, as with all the weathering steps we've done so far, not everybody gets it, and I don't go super crazy with it. Just kind of add it here and there where it looks like it might be warranted. And here we go. So we've now jumped a little bit in time. This is after the washing step and before the basing of the miniatures. I would actually consider this part of the basing step, but the reason I'm bringing things in here is because the final weathering piece is I take, using my dry brush when I'm going through and dry brushing the sand portion of the base, I then stipple along the bottom, maybe quarter of the shield, that highlight color. So when I first put the base down, I use Walmart cheap paints for all this stuff, and I use a darker, like Graveyard Earth kind of color as the base color, and then I go in with a highlight of khaki. It's closer to like not a Shop Debone, whatever the one below that is for Citadel colors. So I'm going through and I'm dry brushing the base before I put down my static grass and clump foliage, things like that. And so as I'm doing that, dusting that dry brush, I then, as you can see, am just very lightly dry brushing the bottom of these shields to create the illusion of dried dirt just kind of caked onto the bottom of the shields. As with all the weathering steps, as I keep saying, you don't go nuts with it. It is really just the very bottom portion of the shield, like what would be nearer to the ground, and I think that creates a neat effect, especially when everything is all ranked up. And then we're about to cut here to the final shot, finished unit. Someone had suggested in the comments on a different video that I have a better overview of the finished unit at the end. So this was the solution, the low-budget solution I came up with, which was to put them on a piece of paper on a Lazy Susan and slowly turn it. So this is what I got. Anyway, I think the end result's pretty cool. It turned out all right. So a couple of videos coming out. I've got my War Games Atlantic reviews coming up for the 2 boxes that were sent. Those should be out probably by this weekend, and some more stuff after that. So in the meantime, happy gaming, guys. Thanks for stopping by.